Okay, today and I am live. Looks like there's not a lot of light. So let's see about doing it 11 a little bit more light. Okay, so it is 7:51 and we're gonna get started. Let's see. Doesn't look like anybody's here at the moment. But we'll get the Discord going. What's going on? Nighttime reading hour. Connect to the stream. Okay, so that's going alright. And looks like there's someone that's popped in for about 8 to 10 minutes now to double check that everything's going okay and give people some time to come in. So there's the audience, night show. At everyone. Sure. No, that's what I wanted to do. So. Okay, add everyone. Because that is how I wanted to go. 10 minutes show time. Okay, so we're here for about 7.5 more minutes. And that's because we're doing blue here. Let's go over to YouTube. Okay, YouTube is unstable, so it's reconnecting. So it sometimes gets unstable and then it reconnects. So that's probably the worst that's going to happen. Hopefully. That's why I love YouTube, because I'm so productive when I'm on YouTube. One watching now. And we're going to share that. Done. Out. So this is also going to record it. And let's see how that goes. Back to there. Nobody else has popped on to the voice at the moment. Strangely started a live video. He's kind of awesome on Instagram. He's a little crazy, but I love him to pieces. And if you want to look up I Am Strangely, at I Am Strangely on Instagram, he's kind of awesome to listen to. He starts his shows about the same time that I do. I do it on Facebook and YouTube and all that good stuff. And I try to stay off of Instagram so that I'm not taking up his stream time. But yes, he's a lot of fun and you should probably check him out. So we've been on for about 5 minutes, and I think I'm the only one that's watching, but I'm not sure. I won't know unless they speak up in the chat. And I know you can chat or comment on your phone, and you can definitely chat on the website. So, saying big shout out to everybody that's popped in. and all that good stuff. Here. Would that be a better light source? Or does it make absolutely no difference? Does it make a lot of difference? It is fairly dark in here, so we'll see how that works out. That's probably part of the reason why it's having such a problem with the video. But yeah. So we're just giving it another few more minutes until we get started. And tonight we're going to be reading from the War of the Worlds, the next chapter, which is chapter 9. And the title is, aptly enough, is Fighting Begins. I believe is what it's titled. Books isn't going to do it, so I have to do it by. Where are the books? There it is. Okay. And the Fighting Begins is what the chapter is called. I really should bookmark these before I get started. For that. So it is now 7:59. It's almost 8 o'clock now. But one more minute. And there is a link on Facebook. That is in a live video. I'm hoping that'll work. But already I'm quite a bit happier with the YouTube stream because I have had absolutely no issues with the lag. And someone else popped in. Welcome. Whether or not you could hear me or not, that sort of thing. No, I have to. There you go. Connection is unstable. Blah blah blah. I'm like, okay. We'll go with that. Voice activity, low sensitivity, automatically determine input sensitivity, that kind of thing. Right, so let the operation system decide, blah blah blah, communication mode, that sort of thing. Letting them decide because I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. So, and it is now 8:01, showtime. There we go. It doesn't look like anyone popped in. A couple of people popped out. And it is now showtime. It is now 8:01, so we will begin. I do have a podcast, and I do want to continually continue up. Let's see. They were typing something. Okay. Oh, come on, Anchor. Move a little quicker. Joan on Anchor. So we'll see what's going on with that. This is a night for working out a lot of mishaps, that kind of thing. So yeah, timing's going to be interesting. I'm trying to get this to load, and it's being just thinking. And let's get the going to do it now. What's it going to do? My partner is actually doing things with the internet downstairs, so whenever he does that, usually takes about a minute to do. Once I got it up. So we're just waiting on that. And it's exactly it'd be absolutely hilarious if it took a test that I had until 8. Work faster. Have an audio recorder. I can just record again. Come on. Come on. Every few seconds it just does something different. It's gonna take me the full 10 minutes just to get this up and going. That would be hilarious. Personally. For me, it would be hilarious. I shall not name names. Okay. I am recording. Okay, good. Good. Okay. So, and aptly enough, this chapter is everybody listening on Anchor, thank you for popping in as well. And on Podbean and on YouTube and on Facebook and all the other places that we're at. And we have someone back. Okay, so the fighting. It was a day of lassitude, too. Hot and close. With, I am told, a rapidly fluctuating barometer. I had slept but little, though my wife had succeeded in sleeping. And I rose early. I went into my garden for breakfast and stood listening. But towards the common there was nothing stirring but a lark. The milkman came as usual. I heard the rattle of his chariots and went round to the side gate to ask the latest news. He told me that during the night the Martians had been surrounded by troops and that guns were expected. Then, a familiar reassuring note, I heard a train running towards Woking. They aren't to be killed, said the milkman, if that can possibly be avoided. I saw my neighbor gardening, chatting with him for a time, and then strolled in to breakfast. It was a most unexceptional morning. My neighbor was of the opinion that the troops would be able to capture or destroy the Martians during the day. It's a pity they make themselves so unapproachable, he said. It would be curious to know how they live on another planet. We might learn a thing or two. He came up to the fence and extended a handful of strawberries, for his gardening was as generous as it was enthusiastic. At the same time, he told me of the burning of the pine woods about the Byfleet golf links. They say, said he, that there's another of those blessed things falling there, number 2. But one's enough, surely. This lot'll cost the insurance people a pretty penny before everything's settled. He laughed with an air of the greatest good humor as he said this. The woods, he said, were still burning, and pointed out the haze of smoke to me. They will be hot underfoot for days. On account, men grew serious over poor Ogilvy. After breakfast, instead of working, I decided to walk down towards the common. Under the railway bridge, I found a group of soldiers, I think, men in small round caps, dirty red jackets unbuttoned and showing their blue shirts, dark trousers and boots coming to the calf. They told me no one was allowed over the canal, and looking along the road towards the bridge, I saw one of the cardigan men standing sentinel there. I talked with these soldiers for a time, and I told them of my sight of the Martians on the previous evening. None of them had seen the Martians, and they had but the vaguest idea of them. So they plied me with questions. They said that they did not know who had authorized the movements of the troops. Their idea was that a dispute had arisen in the House Guards. The ordinary sapper is a great deal better educated than the common soldier, and they discussed the peculiar conditions of the possible fight with some acuteness. I described the heat ray to them, and they began to argue amongst themselves. Crawl up under cover and rush them, say I, said one. Get at, said another. That's cover against this ere eat. Sticks to cook here. What we got to do is go as near as the ground'll let us, and then drive a trench. Blow your trenches. You always want trenches. You ought to have born a rabbit, Snippy. Ain't they got any necks? That repeated my description. Octopuses, said he. That's what I call it. It ain't no murder-killing beasts like that, said the first speaker. Why not shell the darn things straight off and finish them, said the little dark man. You can't tell what they might do. Where's your shells, said the first speaker. There ain't no time. Do it in a rush, that's my tip, and do it at once. So they discussed it. Good. But I will not weary the reader with a description of that long morning and the longer afternoon. I did not succeed in getting a glimpse of the common, for even Horsell and Chobham church towers were in the hands of military authorities. The soldiers I found people in the town quite secure again in the presence of the military, and I heard for the first time from Marshall, the tobacconist, that his son was among the dead on the common. The soldiers had made the people on the outskirts of Horsell lock up and leave their houses. I got back to lunch about 2, very tired, for, as I have said, the day was extremely hot and dull, and in order to refresh me, for the morning papers had contained only the very inaccurate description of the killing of Stent, Henderson, and Ogilvy, and the others. But there was little I didn't know. The Martians did not show an inch of themselves. They seemed busy in their pits, and there was a sound of hammering and an almost continuous streamer of smoke. Apparently they were busy getting ready for a struggle. Fresh attempts have been made to signal, but without success, was the stereotyped formula of the papers. A sapper told me it was done by a man in a ditch with a flag on a long pole. The Martians took as much notice of such advances as we should of a lowing of a cow. I must confess, the sight of all this armament, all this preparation, greatly excited me. My imagination became belligerent and defeated the invaders in a dozen striking ways. Something of my schoolboy dreams of battle and heroism came back. It hardly seemed a fair fight to me at that time. They seemed very helpless in that pit of theirs. About 3 o'clock, there began the thud of the gun at measured intervals from Chertsey or Adel. It was only about 5, however, that a field gun was 6 in the evening. As I sat at tea with my wife in the summer house talking vigorously about the battle that was lowering upon us, I heard the muffled detonation from the common, and immediately after a gust of firing. Close on the heels of that came a violent rattling crash, quite close to us, that shook the ground. And starting out upon the lawn, I saw the tops of the trees about the Oriental College burst into smoky red flame, and the tower of the little church beside it slide down into ruin. The pinnacle of the mosque had vanished, and the roofline of the college itself looked as if a 100-ton gun had been at work upon it. One of our chimneys cracked as if a shot had hit it, flew, and a piece of it came clattering down the tiles and made a heap of it broken red fragments upon the flower bed by my study window. I and my wife stood amazed. Then I realized that the cliff of Maybury Hill must be within range of the Martians' heat ray, now that the college had been cleared out of the way. At that, I gripped my wife's arm and without ceremony ran her out into the road. Then I fetched out a servant, telling her I would go upstairs myself for a box she was clamoring for. "We can't possibly stay here," I said, and as I spoke, the firing reopened for a moment upon the common. "But where are we to go?" said my wife in terror. I thought perplexed. Then I remembered her cousins at Leatherhead. "Leatherhead," I shouted above the sudden noise. She looked away from. "How are we to get to Leatherhead?" she said. Down the hill, I saw a bevy of hussars ride under the railway bridge. 3 galloped through the open gates of the Oriental College. 2 others dismounted and began running from house to house, and threw an unfamiliar lurid light upon everything. "Stop here," said I. "You are safe here in the dog cart." I ran, for I perceived that in a moment every one upon the side of the hill would be moving. A man stood with his back to me, talking to him. The lamp, "The hurry! I'm selling my bit of pig, £2, and you bring it here back? What's going on now?" I explained hastily that I had to leave my home and so secured the dog cart. At the time, it did not seem to be nearly so on the road, and leaving in charge my wife and servant, rushed into my house and packed a few valuables, such plate as I had, and so forth. The beech trees below the house were burning while I did this, and the palings of the road glowed red. While I was occupied in this way, one of the dismounted hussars came running up. He was going from house to house, warning people to leave. He was going on as I came out of my front door, lugging my treasures, done up in a tablecloth. I shouted after him, "What news?" He turned, stared, bawled something about crawling out in a thing like a dish cover, and ran on to the gate at the west. A sudden whirl of black smoke, driving across the road, hid him for a moment. I ran to my neighbor's door, and I went in again, according to my promise, to get my servant's box, lugged it out, clapped it beside her on the tail of the dog cart, and then caught the reins and jumped up into the driver's seat beside my wife. In another moment, we were clear of the smoke and noise, and spanking down the opposite slope of Maybury Hill towards Old Woking. In front was a quiet, sunny landscape, a wheat field ahead on each side of the road, and Maybury Inn with its swinging sign. I saw the doctor's cart ahead of me. At the bottom of the hill, I turned my head to look at the hillside I was leaving. The thick streamers of black smoke, shot with threads of red fire, were driving up into the still air and throwing dark shadows upon the green treetops eastward. The smoke already extended by far to the east and west, to the Byfleet pine woods eastward, and to Walking on the west. The road was dotted with people running towards us, and very faint now, but very distinct through the hot, quiet air. One heard the whir of machine guns were setting fire to everything within range of their heat ray. I am not an expert driver, and I had immediately to turn my attention to the horse. When I looked back again, and the second hill had hidden the black smoke, I slashed the horse with the whip and gave him a loose rein until Walking and Send lay between us and that quivering tumult. I overtook and passed the doctor between Walking and Send. And that ends chapter 9. A little bit of excitement. And there's one person on here that is on here. If I could ask if everybody could hear me. That doesn't look like at least this is terribly much. Checking, double checking, getting a drink of water. That's always one thing. Alright, let's pop in and then say something in the chat. Takes a second for it to pop up. Okay. So we've been on for about 34 minutes, so about 10 minutes. And these chapters are really great, because they're kind of set up to be actually spoken in about 10 reading hour. Welcome. Okay. And then they pop out. So we'll be continuing on to the 10th, back to the beginning of the 10th chapter. Let's double check just how long the 10th chapter is. Yeah, that isn't a tier. That's as long as the last one, so about 10-15 minutes of reading. Okay, so let's continue on with the 10th chapter. Chapter 10, In the Storm. Leatherhead is about 12 miles from Maybury Hill. The scent of hay was in the air through the lush meadows beyond Cryford, and the hedges on either side were sweet and gay with multitudes of roses. The heavy firing that had broken out while we were driving down Maybury Hill ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving the evening very peaceful and still. We got to Leatherhead without misadventure about 9 o'clock, and the horse had an hour's rest, while I took supper with my cousins and commended my wife to their care. My wife was curiously silent throughout the drive, and seemed oppressed with forebodings of evil. I talked to her reassuringly, pointing out that the Martians were tied to the pit by sheer heaviness, and at the utmost could but crawl a little out of it. But she answered only in monosyllables. Had it not been I had. Her face, I remember, was very white as we parted. For my own part, I had been feverishly excited all day. Something very like the war fever that occasionally runs through a civilized community had got into my blood. In my heart, I was not so very sorry that I had to return to Maybury that night. I was even afraid that that last fusillade I had heard might mean the extermination of our invaders from Mars. I can best express my state of mind by saying that I wanted to be in at the death. The passage of my cousin's house, it seemed indeed black, and it was not as hot and close as the day. Albeit not a breath stirred the shrubs about us. I knew the road intimately. My wife stood in the light of the doorway and watched me until I jumped up into the dog cart. Then abruptly she turned and went in, leaving my cousins side by side, wishing me good hap. I was a little depressed at first with the contagion of my wife's fears, but very soon my thoughts reverted to the Martians. At that time, I was absolutely in the dark as to the course of the evening's fighting. I did not know even the circumstances that had precipitated the conflict. As I came through Occam, for that was the way I returned, and not through Send and Old Walking, I saw along the western horizon a blood-red glow, which, as I drew nearer, crept slowly up the sky. The driving clouds of the gathering thunderstorm mingled there with masses of black and red smoke. Ripley Street was deserted, and excepted for a lighted window or so, the village showed not a sign of life. But I narrowly escaped an accident at the corner of the road to Pryford, where a knot of people stood with their backs to me. They said nothing to me as I passed. I do not know what they knew of the things happening beyond the hill, nor do I know if the silent houses I passed on my way were sleeping securely or deserted and empty, or harassed and watched against the night. From Ripley until I came through Hereford, I was in the valley of the Way, and the red glare was hidden from me. As I ascended the little hill beyond Pryford Church, the glare came into view again, and the trees about me shivered with the first interchange, black and sharp against red. Even as I beheld this lurid green lit the road about the distant woods towards Addlestone, I felt a tug at the reins. I saw that the driving clouds had been pierced to my left. It was the third falling star, close on its apparition, and blindingly violet by contrast. Danced out the first lightning of the gathering storm, and the thunder burst like a rocket overhead. The horse took the bit between his teeth and bolted. A moderate incline ran towards the foot of Maybury Hill, and down this we clattered. The thunderclaps, treading one on the heels of another, and with a strange crackling accompanying it, sounded more like the working of a gigantic electric machine than the usual dead reverberations. The flickering light was blinding and confusing, and a thin hail smote gustily at my face as I drove down the slope. At first, I regarded little but the road before me, and then abruptly my attention was arrested. At first, I took it for the wet roof of a house, but one flash following another showed it to be in swift rolling movement. It was an elusive vision, a moment of bewildering darkness, and then in a flash like daylight, the red masses of the orphanage near the crest of the hill, and the green tops of the pine trees, and this problematical object came out clear and sharp by this, a monstrous tripod, higher than many houses, striding over the young pine trees and smashing them aside in its career. A walking engine of glittering metal, striding now across the heather. Articulate ropes of steel dangling from it, and clattering tumult of its ditch mingling with the riot of thunder. A flash, and it came out vividly. heeling over one way and 2 feet in the air, to vanish and reappear almost instantly as it seemed, with the next flash 100 yards nearer. Can you imagine a milking stool tilted and bowled violently along the ground? That was the impression those instant flashes gave. But instead of a milking stool, imagine it to be a great body of machinery on a tripod stand. Then suddenly the trees in the pine wood ahead of me were parted, and a second huge tripod appeared, rushing, as it seemed, headlong towards me, and I was galloping hard to meet it. At the sight of the second monster, my nerve went altogether. Not stopping to look again, I wrenched the horse's head hard round to the right, and in another moment the dog cart had heeled over upon the horse. The shaft smashed noisily, and I was flung sideways and fell heavily into the shallow pool of water. I crawled out almost immediately, and crouched, my feet still in the water, under a clump of firs. The horse lay motionless, its neck was broken. Poor Bruce. And by the lightning strikes I saw the black bulk of the overturned dog cart and the silhouette of the wheel still spinning slowly. In another moment, the colossal mechanism went striding by me and passed uphill towards Cahpter. Seen nearer, the thing was incredibly strange, for it was no more insensate machine driving on its way. Machine it was, with a ringing metallic pace, tentacles, one of which gripped a young pine tree, swinging and rattling, and the brazen hood and that surmounted it. Behind the main body was a huge out from the joints of its limbs as the monster swept by me, and in an instant it was gone. So much I saw then, all vaguely for the flickering of lightning, in blinding highlights and dense, exultant, deafening howl that drowned the thunder. Alloo! Alloo! And in another minute it was with its companion, half a mile away, stooping over something in a field. I have no doubt this thing in the field was the third of the 10 cylinders they had fired at us from Mars. For some minutes I lay there in the rain and the darkness watching. By the intermittent light, these monstrous beings of metal moving about in the distance over the hedge tops. A thin hail was now beginning. As it came and went, their figures grew misty and then flashed into clearness again. Now and then came a gap in the lightning, and the night swallowed them up. I was soaked with hail above and puddled water below. It was some time before my blank astonishment would let me struggle up the bank to a drier position, or think at all of my imminent peril. Not far from me was a little one-room squatter's hut of wood, surrounded by a patch of potato garden. I struggled to my feet at last, and crouching and making use of every chance of cover, I made a run for this. I hammered at the door, but I could not make the people hear if there was any people inside, and after a time I desisted, and availing myself of a ditch for the greater part of the way, I succeeded in crawling unobserved by these monstrous machines into the pine wood towards Maybury. Under cover of this, I pushed on, wet and shivering now, towards my own house. I walked among the trees, trying to find the footpath. It was very dark indeed in the wood, for the lightning was now becoming infrequent. and the hail, which was pouring down in a torrent, fell in columns through the gaps of the heavy foliage. The street Cahpter. And so gone back to rejoin my wife, I was bruised, weary, wet to the skin, deafened and blinded from the storm. I had a vague idea of going on to my own house, and that was as much motive as I had. I staggered through the trees, fell into a ditch, and bruised my knees against a plank, and finally splashed out into the lane that ran down from the college arms. I say splashed, for the storm water was in a muddy. There in the darkness, a man blundered into me and sent me reeling back. He gave a cry of terror, sprang sideways, and rushed on before I could gather my wits sufficiently to speak to him. So heavy, I went close up to the fence on the left and worked my way along the palings. Near the top, I stumbled upon, and by a flash of lightning, saw between my feet a heap of black broadcloth and a pair of boots. Before I could distinguish clearly how the man lay, the flicker of light had passed. I stood over him waiting for the next flash. When it came, I saw that he was a sturdy man, cheaply but not shabbily dressed. His head was bent over his body, and he lay crumpled up close to the fence, as though he had been flung violently against it. Overcoming the repugnance natural to me, to one who had never before touched a dead body, I stooped and turned him over to feel for his heart. He was quite dead. I sprang to my feet. It was the landlord of the Spotted Dog, whose conveyance I had taken. I stepped. Nothing was burning on the hillside, though from the common there was still a red glare and a rolling tumult. Far I could see by the flashes. Down the road towards Maybury Bridge, there were voices and the sound of feet, but I had not the courage to shout or go to them. I let myself in with my latchkey, closed monsters, and of the dead body smashed against the fence. I crouched at the foot of the staircase with my back to the wall, shivering violently. Okay, so it is now 8:40 in the evening. So I will bid you all good night. Thank you everyone for popping in and listening. I hope everybody was able to hear me and able to pop in and be with me as I read War of the Worlds this evening. So thank you for popping in, and I will hopefully see you. Let's see. Let's double check my calendar before I say any more. I posted in the group. So that's a post. Blah, blah, blah. So events. So May 21st is today. So yes, May 22nd at 8 p.m. At same bat time, same bat place. We will be reading. Let's see, what am I doing this Friday? And I have that written down as well in my schedule. Friday nights is Grimm's Fairy Tales, so we will be reading a selection from Grimm's Fairy Tales tomorrow at 8 p.m. And once again, I will post. What I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to post a live video about 15 minutes before 8 o'clock. And that video will include a link to this video of the live stream. My YouTube channel, you'll get a heads up to that. So, all right, now I will bid everyone a good evening, and I hope you are well, and I hope you remain well, and I hope you remain safe, especially during this time, and we will see each other tomorrow for a selection of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Thank you, and happy